Hello and welcome to another episode of Sexual Confidence on Tap with Shannon Ethridge and friends, where I have my friend, Reverend Dr. Angie McCarty, and all of this research that she has done doing her dissertation on the damage of the purity movement. Tell us the exact title of your dissertation.
Messy Sex, a complicated sexual ethic to heal the damage of the purity movement.
I am so elated that she has dove so deep into these waters, because for years we've all been talking about, that purity movement really jacked a lot of people up, and I was touched by it, and what did I do to my kids? And for us to unpack this, I just think is so important, because that's one of the most common questions that I get from parents now. Is it's not just their concern about their own sex life and what the messages in their head have done to their own marriages. They are concerned about what they've done to their adult children, or if they're still raising children, if we're not going to teach them the passport to purity or the true love waits concepts, what do we teach them?
Right.
So thanks for all of this hard work that you've done and your willingness to share it so generously with us. Today is not the last installment of this, by the way. You're like, is this? It's like the lamb chop, the song that never ends. It's like the series that never ends. No, it is about to come to an end. We are going to have another conversation about personal boundaries after today. But today, I feel as if this is the one that's really going to meet the deeply felt need, because I can't imagine how difficult it is raising teenagers in this era and teaching them about sex. I mean, I remember my kids having the Verizon flip phones where they could T9 text. And, that was a big deal. But, my kids didn't have smartphones until they were, a little bit older. But gosh, kids today are being raised with all this technology at the tip of their fingers and just living in even more of a sex saturated culture than ever before. But it's not even a healthy sex saturated culture.
No.
It's like, if it was a healthy sex saturated culture, I don't think that would be such a bad thing, but it's such a dysfunctional sex saturated culture. So Angie, take us into these waters of, when do you start talking to teenagers? What do you talk to them about? What do you avoid like the plague? I hear from you.
I would say if you are having your first conversation with your child when they are a teenager, it's too late. We have to start talking about and normalizing those conversations earlier in their lives. By the time they become teenagers, they're going to get squirrely and icky, and you've already lost authority. You know nothing when your kid is a teenager. But if you start normalizing those conversations when they're younger, then you can continue that through their teenage years. And let me tell you, as the mom of we have 3 in our house right now, 15, 17, and 19, all boys.
You're in the thick of it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And we said in our last episode that each of the kids are different, and how they are living out their sexuality now is different. I wonder if beginning with the end in mind is how we ought to approach talking to our kids about any number of topics, but about sexuality. What kind of relationship do you want to have with your kids? How do you want to be able to talk to your kids about sex when they are 15, 17, 19, and then starting early enough to make sure that you have developed that trust and rapport with them before they get to that age?
It doesn't, so that such an awkward conversation in their ears, because mom and dad have been talking about this for years. It's not unusual. Okay, so normalizing the fact that we talk about this with them long before they ever become teenagers. In fact, one woman reached out to me. She had been focusing on healing in her own life, and all of a sudden she shifted gears. She said, I've just realized my daughter is now 15, and I've never talked to her about her own sexual stuff because I've been so focused on mine. And I was like, well, I mean, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is today. The best time to talk to your daughter about sex would have been 10 years ago, but second best time is today. If you're listening to this and thinking, well, I've already blown it. My kids are already teenagers. Stop. Don't catastrophize. The best time to do it is as soon as possible, but obviously the earlier the better.
Yeah. One of the things that I have done that I think has helped my kids to feel more comfortable talking to me about sex is I've tried to learn from them and asked them what they know, what are their friends talking about. Of course, this requires a certain amount of trust. What's happening in their world? What do freshmen in high school talk about with sex? Because you know what? You don't know. You're not a freshman in high
Not
school.
the same as when you were a freshman in high school. I promise
That
you that.
is the truth. Yeah, so I had a conversation with my son about this recently, and it brought to mind something that I probably didn't talk to enough about my older kids, not just intercourse. What is normative now is oral sex and anal sex because those don't count.
They don't
Mhm.
count because they wouldn't shame the family with an unplanned pregnancy.
Right.
Is that it?
Yep. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Which makes my heart sink a little bit. Why is that? Why does it feel as if my heart just kind of melts a little and pours into my gut? Is it because like I can't remember I was sexually active from the time that I mean my first sexual experience was 14, but I was sexually active at 15. But I don't remember wanting to have oral sex or anal sex. It was
Ooh.
more just exploration and bartering for attention and affection. But the idea that this is the expectation,
Mhm.
and I guess maybe it's not right that my heart is only bleeding for girls. Maybe it should be bleeding for boys too.
Oh,
I don't know.
I think so. I mean, I think that going back to our purity days, we remember the 12 stages of intimacy or 12 steps of intimacy. And we would say, these are the stages of intimacy. Eye to eye contact is the least intimate, and genital to genital is the most intimate. In my experience, life experience, not always relational experience, but talking to people, what we know is that genital to anal is just as intimate as genital to genital.
In
But
my
mouth to
opinion, it's
genital.
more. In my opinion, it's more intimate. And here's why I think that it's because that requires a lot more trust, a lot more control, because there's a lot more vulnerability and a lot more potential for pain and
Mhm.
infection and all of that. So, like, that would be something that, oh my gosh, it would be so far down the spectrum from where two teenagers are that it's,
Right. But
but the idea that this is the norm,
mhm,
and I think that
yeah,
has to be a product of the pornography industry.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yes, I do too. And let's remember too, I think that males offering females oral sex is more intimate than genital to genital because there's a much higher possibility for orgasm for her
Yeah.
in that.
So
Mhm.
more vulnerability to pain, more vulnerability to pleasure,
Right.
more of the senses involved with the
Mhm.
sight, sound, smell, taste, touch.
Yep.
I'm with you. These are very, very intimate acts. And talking to them about your teenagers is really hard.
Yes. Yes.
But I have to say, I have to insert this little funny story. I'm really glad that I did talk to my teenagers so often about sex
Yeah.
because recently my son was visiting for the holidays and we're both Emma Stone fans. We really like her as an actress. And I love Mark Ruffalo because my husband looks just like him, as I mentioned in the last episode. So Mark Ruffalo and Emma Stone in this movie called Poor Things. Have you seen?
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, well, we had no idea when we walked into that movie theater that we were basically going to be watching a porno. That's what it feels like. And I mean, I'm not going to say it's, yeah, I'm not going to say, I mean, some people would love it and some people would hate it. And I'm not going to tell you how to feel about the movie, but I will just say, sitting next to my 28-year-old son for this entire 2.5 hour film was really awkward enough, but it would have been so much more awkward if we had never had natural conversations
Mhm.
around this topic. This is who we are. I was also going to say that when you mentioned having these various ages of teenage boys in the house and that they're all kind of experiencing their sexuality in different ways in different seasons, I know that there are some parents' ears that were like needle off a record type of a thing. What? They shouldn't be experiencing their sexuality. Stop. We experience our sexuality from the time we are conceived or the time that we, are in our mother's womb until we die. We're sexual beings from cradle to grave. There is
And,
no turning this switch off.
and parents, you don't get to control when your child comes into their sexuality.
Right. The word control is laughable when it
Uh-huh.
comes to this topic.
Uh-huh. Parents could be total creepers and literally lock their children in the house. That will create a whole set of problems for you too.
Yeah.
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 So I
But
think the
knowing that your
question is,
kids are sexual beings is a really great place to start, mom and dad. I remember about to do a talk at a church, and this father spoke up at the parent conference and said, I don't think that my 13-year-old daughter even knows that boys have a penis. I don't want her, looking at pictures of them, or he just felt like that it was too much too soon. And the other parents just looked at him like he had lost his mind. I didn't
yeah,
even say a word. He was
yeah.
just like, am I off base here? And all the moms were like,
Mhm.
you're
Yes, you are.
like you're in La La Land to think that your kids don't know what they already know. They already know a lot. I can promise you they probably know far more than you think they know.
Without a doubt. Yes. Because kids talk about this stuff because so many of them think it is taboo. We want to talk about that stuff that we're not supposed to, especially kids. One of the things that I've always done with my kids is when they would talk about, like, whenever they laugh at the number 69, stone cold face, cold stone faced, I say, "What is that? Why what's special about that number?" And they'll say, "It's a sexual position." Really? What kind of sexual position? What?
Do you really play dumb?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
help me understand the psychology behind that.
Because I think I have always told them if they don't know what it is, they shouldn't be talking about it. And then I will teach them. I will tell them. So I play dumb to see what they know.
Okay, do they know
Yeah,
that you're playing dumb to see what they know?
I mean, not now. I mean,
Okay,
not anymore. But
because I'm
when
thinking that to come across as I can be this age and married this long and not know what 69 is would completely shoot your credibility as any
yeah,
sort of sex expert.
yes.
So I would probably
Yeah.
go on the opposite end of the spectrum. I remember playing a game of Cards Against Humanity with my kids, and the cards that my son laid out was something along the lines of, my mother has a huge collection of really unusual vibrators or sex toys or
Mhm.
something, and everybody just got a big laugh out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You just say, "Yeah, I do."
there was no
Yep.
denial whatsoever.
Yeah. Oh, no. No. Yeah, plain stupid is definitely a technique that I have
It's,
employed
it's a
to see.
specific strategy to extract information. Gotcha.
Totally. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they've caught on by now. Yeah, that was, something that I couldn't use over and over again, and now they'll just come out and say, "Oh, it's when the head's on the penis and the mouth is on the vagina." Like, it's so when I if I say, "Oh, guys, what's that?" Then they'll just come out and it's like, it's their foot. It's just common
Yeah.
now because we have talked about it, which doesn't make it common in that they're going to go do it because it's not a big deal. It's common that we can talk about it.
Right. This is a
And
safe conversation. We're just
mhm,
setting a tone here, people. There's no
mhm,
way that a parent is going to be the sole source of sex education anyway. We're just contributing to the conversation with a tone. And if the
mhm,
tone is safety and positivity, you're doing
mhm.
your job.
Because what you ultimately want is if your child has sex or has a sexual experience and they need someone to talk to and process that with, you want them to come to you.
Or at least you
As-
want them to feel as if they could come to you if there wasn't
That,
something else in their life that they felt more open and free. But I
yeah,
also want them to know that, hey, there's a few people in our world that I would feel really comfortable for you to go to them if you were uncomfortable coming to me. Like, you would be one of the ones that I would mention. And, like, let your kids know that it's okay to talk about this, if not
yes,
me, somebody.
yes, yes. I I've been thinking a lot recently. Um, Stick with me because this is kind of an ADHD trail down a rabbit hole. Thinking about my divorce and what an incredible trauma that was. Thankfully, now in my household with my kids, we just talk about it like it was an event.
Right.
And yeah,
Years
so
later,
I
it is
mean,
what it is.
like almost 10 years ago now. Um, and thinking about how I did so much therapy, read so much, processed with friends to come out of this stronger than I was before. And wondering what I hope for in my kids' future. What if my kids marry someone I don't think is appropriate for them and then they get divorced? So, of course, I hope that my kids have lifelong relationships, that they have a 65th wedding anniversary party. Of course, that if it's a healthy marriage,
That's
that's what I hope for them.
sure.
And if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. Now, don't hear me wrong.
No, I'm
So,
I'm I'm making the correlation,
mhm,
but I want to make sure our
so,
listeners are. Yep, I see where you're
yeah,
going.
so when I talk to my kids, I don't want to do anything that makes them think that sex is casual or should be casual, that it is to be shared um, flippantly,
Right.
that sex is a beautiful, sacred thing that God has created for our pleasure. However, if you have sex and if it is not all that you hoped it would be, if you are having sex with someone when you're 16 and you break up and it's the end of the world, it's not the end of the world.
Yes.
That you will survive.
Yes.
You and I have both survived far worse than having sex when you are 16 and it being a horrible experience. You have survived that. I have survived. So I want my kids to come to me so that that's the message that they get from someone who's been there and had experience.
That anything is survivable.
Yes,
Okay.
because too many
And let me
times,
translate this to purity culture language. That
yes,
you are not damaged goods that no one will now want.
right.
That was the message that was overwhelming to especially girls, is
Uh,
that, hey,
yeah,
if I do this and I don't wind up with a ring on my finger and the 65 wedding anniversary party, then I'm damaged goods. Nobody's going to want me. And then
right,
they lower their standard to take anybody who'll take them. And then they wind up miserable 10 years later,
right.
if that long.
We live in a culture where teenage mental health is at its lowest that it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a culture, and especially Johnson County, Kansas, has an incredibly high teenage suicide rate.
Wow.
And so building this sense of resilience in our kids has to be a part of the conversation. You know
Absolutely.
what we never talked about in our teachings was grace
Mm-hmm.
and forgiveness. Maybe we made some offhanded, you can reclaim your secondary virginity today, confess, and our God who is
Messed up.
faithful.
Don't mess up again.
Right, right. You get a pass one time almost.
Yeah.
When the message of scripture is that grace upon grace upon grace, that God's forgiveness is never out of out of reach for us.
Right.
That's the gospel.
Yeah. I posted something on Facebook recently that got so many responses that basically just said, aren't we glad that Jesus never said, okay, but this is the last time I'm going to clean you up?
Oh,
Well, aren't
yeah,
we all glad of that? So
yeah,
resiliency, a lack of shame, a sense of hope. Again, going back to
Yes.
positivity of
Yeah.
these are not salvation issues.
Mhm.
This does not negate your desirability.
Mhm.
And it certainly should not be a mental health issue to the point of such overwhelming anxiety, depression, and even
Yeah.
suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
But I would venture to say that the vast majority of the teenagers that I've ever worked with who have a lot of sexual trauma to process, anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts
Yeah.
is part of the smorgasbord.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
could that be because as a society, this is what we've been teaching is that it's of such monumental importance that she be kept pure.
Uh-huh.
That's not the case. I hate that word pure. It just
I do too. I do
every
too.
every time it comes, it's like bile. It just
Yeah, it
because
is. I
our
throw up in my
purity
mouth a
never
little
came
bit.
from what we do or don't do. Our purity was only purchased for us at the cross. And the person who was a virgin on their wedding day and the person who's had 50 partners on their wedding day,
Mhm.
they're equally as pure according to the blood of the
Yeah.
cross. So I digress, but I think it's an
I,
important digression. Um,
yep.
there was a lady at a workshop recently, and this was quite the surprise to us in that they'd been married 10 years and I'm going to say that they had barely consummated their marriage.
Mm.
Barely. They had
Mhm.
fooled around some, and I think maybe even had intercourse prior to marriage. And so they both thought that they would be compatible, but it wasn't her that struggled to the point of not being able to perform or engage sexually. It was him.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember talking with this couple and asking the woman who I felt like had been a real trooper, could you imagine being married to a man for 10 years and he's never been able to successfully make love to you? The stories that she had told herself in her mind about, I must not be pretty enough, I must not be
Oh, yeah.
skinny enough or attractive enough or whatever. But I said, what? And no shocker, he was raised in a very strict legalistic home that just had all kinds of rules and regulations. And the fact that they had broken those rules and regulations before they ever married
Yeah.
took so much wind out of his sexual sails. So it's not always the female. But I remember distinctly asking her, were you raised in a religious home? And she said, we went to church. We weren't like, had to be there every Sunday or anything, but, we worshiped and we celebrated religious holidays. And I said, and what did your parents instill in you about your sexuality? And she said, well, my mother just told me that it's a very special act and that she hoped that my every sexual experience in life would be positive ones with no guilt and no remorse and no trauma. And I thought, that's
Oh,
a really healthy message. And I think that her being grounded in that was what helped her hold on while her husband worked on his stuff.
wow.
Yeah. So I think that it's not just what we're teaching them that keeps them from misbehaving or whatever before marriage. It's what kind of values do they take about their own sexuality, sensuality, and sense of self worth
Yes,
within marriage and throughout their lifetimes.
definitely. What a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that less is more. Uh, you
I
know,
wonder.
the the fact that her mother didn't overwhelm her with, sexual conversations right and left, but the ones that she did have with her were always involving kind of the elements that you've talked about. Consent, that I hope that it would be consent, that they would have your consent and that you would have theirs, and that it would be mutually beneficial and pleasurable and that you wouldn't feel guilt or shame or trauma over it. It's like, isn't that the best that we can hope for overall?
And the underlying message in that kind of teaching is, wow, my mom trusts me enough to know myself and make my own decisions. I must be capable of that.
Yes.
When we say to kids or youth, you know, it's very difficult to control your urges when you're in the back seat of a car. So you need to decide right now what your boundary is going to be. That gives them the idea that there's going to be a time when they are completely out of control, that they are like animals, that the spiritual gift of self control leaves the situation and there is something wrong with what they're doing. That's powerful.
You want to know what I think that sets people up for? that when they're dating someone or courting, or when they're alone with someone that they have an overwhelming attraction to, the message is there's no way that this can be healthy or good because there's such sexual alchemy, such sexual chemistry here. I'm overwhelmed with the temptation. Rather than just taking a step back and waiting until the season is right, but holding on to that sexual alchemy and that
Uh-huh.
they break up with them. And then they find someone that they have no problem staying out of a backseat with because there's not that sexual chemistry and alchemy. Then years later in marriage, there's still no, I guess they think that they're going to put
Yeah.
their hand on their finger and all this chemistry is going to
Yes,
nowhere. God's just going to rain
that's
down
what,
from heaven.
yes, but that's what we taught them.
Exactly.
If you wait
Exactly.
until marriage, then their sex life will be amazing in marriage.
Yeah. And then 20, 30, I'm even working with couples now who've been married close to 40 years, that they look back in hindsight and go, now, how is it that we always have been able to resist each other so well, but we've never found it irresistible to lean in, to engage, to arouse, to titillate, to play, and
Mhm.
for them to try to learn that now in this season of life, it's totally possible.
Yeah.
It's possible, but I just find it sad that we have trained people to think that if there's chemistry, that's bad, run away. If there's a manageable amount of chemistry, then that must be a sign that it's holy, it's pure. I think that one of the holiest things in the world is when you can't possibly keep your hands off of each other because that passion is just like coursing through your veins as ravenously as your own blood.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we reach those heights of passion and pleasure, is when I feel the closest to God and the closest to some sort of heavenly experience. Is it okay to teach kids that this is what I want? I want it to be so rock your face off good, and letting that tension build and savoring it, but pacing yourself and not jumping into sex too quickly, because sometimes we misjudge the person, that the character isn't there, but that we want you to have that chemistry. We want you to
Yeah.
have alchemy. Don't you think that that's
Yes.
what we would want for our kids?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's scary because they might want to go out and do it.
And right. And I might plant that thought in their head. Like the gay kindergarten teacher is gonna turn every kindergartner gay because we have planted that in their heads that is not the way people work.
Right.
And
This whole idea that well, kind of like harkening back to divorce. When you go through a divorce, people think you're contagious. They like treat you like you have the plague. It's this whole idea of, oh, but if we know somebody who is gay, or somebody who's a drag queen, or somebody who's divorced, or somebody who's stop. You won't, everybody gets one vote about their sexuality, and they don't waste it on somebody else. Or some people try, but everyone gets to discern who they are, who they perceive themselves to be, gender orientation, vision, perception, pleasure, the opposite of pleasure, what repulses them. Like, we get to decide that ourselves, and we only get one vote, and it's our own. And we can't even control our partner in that regard. I find
right.
it so sad when normally younger married couples feel as if what turns me on has to be exactly what turns you on, and if something turns you on that doesn't turn me on, that shouldn't turn you on anymore. I think teaching young people that, I mean, you alluded to it in the last episode, that what I find pleasurable is not going to be what everyone else finds pleasurable, and what everyone else finds pleasurable I might not find pleasurable. So then that takes me back to the conversations around, I think we need to really liberate our kids of, you know what, if you don't want to be the one going down on a bunch of guys with lipstick on with these rainbow parties, if you don't want to be the one taking it in the butt because guys are like, hey, I expect this in a relationship, and this won't get us pregnant or whatever, it's okay for you to say no to that. I would hope that you would say
Yes.
that.
And not just youth, not just teenagers, not just young adults, but if you are out there 50 years old and you are in a relationship where you are involved in an activity that's not comfortable for you, say no. I get that that's hard and takes a lot of courage, but say no.
Yes.
Consent matters within a relationship, within a marriage. And that's the other thing we don't talk to our older kids about. So maybe young adult age. I've heard a lot of stories from women who say, well, my parents didn't talk to me about sex until the night before my wedding. And wow.
Talk about too little too late. That's about a classic
Absolutely.
case right there.
Right. And by and large, these are older women in a generation that's older than us. But to teach our kids about marital sex and it not happening like
Mhm.
right away, it not being fantastic right out the gate.
It could be
uh,
challenging at first. It could be painful at first. It could be a source of tension and frustration in your relationship for seasons. And that's okay. That's normal.
and dear God, teach your girls about UTIs.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah,
My
but that's what we
honeymoon
do. We send them into marriage going, well, this is it. This is the big night that you've been waiting for. And now you're totally exhausted after this big wedding, and you're supposed to go behind that hotel room door. And it's supposed to be like this earth shattering orgasmic experience. It
uh-huh.
rarely ever is the first time.
Right.
So, yes, helping
Yeah.
them adjust their expectations.
Mhm.
And also, I think that it's important to let them know too that I think that there's been a lot of focus on if you've had previous sexual partners, that there's no way that you're going to be able to enter into a sexual relationship in marriage and not have all that haunt you day and night every second that you're
Uh,
having sex. That's just BS.
BS.
It is total BS. I think that by and large, I haven't done any research on this topic, but when we look at the number of people who don't get the dream of, I married my high school sweetheart. We were married our entire lives, and it was the only person that either one of us have ever had. Most of us don't get that storybook. Most of us have more than one, if not multiple, marriage partners or sexual partners throughout the course of your lifetime. We have to level the playing field about this conversation and just make it about positivity around sexuality, because this is how God wired us.
Yeah.
I really love Rob Bell's book called Sex God. I think it's one of the
Yes.
books I've never read a book going, I wish I had written this, but
Yeah.
I definitely felt that way about Sex God. If we could extract the overwhelming negativity out of out of healthy sexuality. But I like how you are saying it's okay to infuse negativity into unhealthy sexuality.
Mhm.
You have a choice. You can have boundaries. You can say no. It doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter how much you've had to drink. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. None of this matters. You can always decide
Mhm.
what you want to do, who you want to do it with. And it's also okay if you wind up doing something that you regret. It's not the end of the world. And you don't have
Yeah.
a scarlet letter on your sweater that you have to don every day of your life. To
And you have a safe landing place with me.
Yes, yes, I like
Yeah.
that. That
Yeah.
the message is, this is a sacred topic, but there's no part of it that is off limits.
Yeah.
It the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, the beautiful, the tangible, the intangible, the fantasy, the
Yeah.
just the practicality, all of it is is on the table for conversation. But I
Yeah.
understand that as your parent, I may not be the person that you really want to talk to. I'm just letting you know though, if you ever want to have that conversation, I'm here.
Here. My the pastor at one of the churches where I work, this might be a good wrap-up story. He a couple maybe every few years talks about love and marriage and sex from the pulpit, which is fantastic. And he tells about being an 18-year-old kid um, with huge sexual urges, and he was in a Pentecostal church, so they thought that the world was coming to an end like tomorrow. They got married right after graduation because there were things they really wanted to experience before they went off to heaven in the second
Oh,
coming.
raptured? Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Now he's United Methodist and much more balanced than that. Like
Okay.
it, we talk about our church being a place for thinking people.
Uh-huh.
And so, um, but I noticed and was horrified that the last time before this most recent time he talked about sex, he used the duct tape image. So the duct tape example, if you are not steeped in purity culture, you put duct tape on someone's arm and you say, every time that person gives themselves sexually to another person, it's like ripping off the duct tape when they break up. And then you have another sexual partner and it kind of sticks the second time, but then you break up and you rip it off. And eventually that duct tape becomes not sticky anymore. So I had a conversation with him about my dissertation and all that stuff. And then at the end, I begged him, I said, please don't use the duct tape example anymore. Primarily, well, it's triggering, but also it's just not accurate.
It's not accurate.
That I was married for 15 years. And I even said, and I was way stickier with Jonathan than I ever was with my first husband. And then I thought, I just said that I'm sticky with my husband's and that probably didn't sound, you know what I mean.
Oh, I think it's a perfect wrap up to this conversation.
He didn't have the life experience to know that. And good for him. He and his wife, I hope and pray, have an amazing relationship and sex life and have a 65th wedding anniversary and all of that stuff. But it just isn't most people's experiences that previous sexual partners ruins them for their lifelong mate.
Right. I definitely think that stickiness, that bondedness depends on the quality of the relationship and the safety that person feels and the trust that they share in that relationship. And you can have that with someone regardless of what age you are or how many previous marriages or partners that you've had. I think that is the gift from God. That is the gift that is sexuality, is that it does have the power to bond us to that person in such a rich and beautiful and fulfilling way. And I'm sad that not every sexual experience produces that, but that is the reality. I think that's the healthiest reality that we can present to teenagers, is that, you know what, I want it to be pleasurable for you and healthy and something that adds to the totality of your life, not something that you look back on and regret or realize that it wasn't as healthy as you thought it was. But lifespan integration of these conversations, because here's the thing. If we teach our kids as teenagers that, oh, this is this horrible thing, it's so shameful, please don't shame the family this way, don't get pregnant, don't get the STI, don't hold hands before marriage, don't be alone with them in a car, don't have your first kiss until the altar. If it's all about don't throughout the rest of their life, that is the tape that will be playing. And we don't have to tell them to do it, because that's what comes natural. Like I was talking about the puppies on the last episode, it will come natural to us to do it, but let's have it be a positive conversation about this is what's normal. This is what's healthy. This is what's beautiful. It goes back to that passage of scripture, whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, whatever is pure. Sex is pure. Sex is pure. And if you're still in the mindset that sex is not pure, go back to episode 1 and start over.
And come to one of your weekends.
Yes, I'm going to throw in a couple little pitches. We just did Couples at the Well over Valentine's Day weekend. Such a powerful experience for Charlie and I to have 4 days with 3 to 4 couples and go deep in examining what they have been taught and what they've experienced. And the really cool thing is that one couple had been married for, I think, 37 years. Another couple almost that long. Another couple had been married like 16 years, then divorced for several years, and now they've been in this marriage for 5 years. And so there was a broad range, of ages and life experiences. But our next one is, I believe, June 6th through the 9th, if I recall the dates exactly. I know that it's early June. And then also Women at the Well is the perfect opportunity to come and put your own beliefs and values under the microscope to see where has it been tainted. Because I promise you, you did not grow up in our culture the past 30, 40, 50 years and get by unscathed. There have been negative teachings coming out of the church and our family homes and our peers and media and just total ignorance. And it has impacted our sexual self-esteem. And Angie and I have both been on our individual journeys personally and on professional journeys to correct our course and how we guide people to make sure that it is in alignment with what God wants for us, with what he's designed for us, with what is possible with the human spirit. So I would love to have you at the next Women at the Well workshop. That is April 23rd through the 26th. They are always in Springfield, Missouri. And you can find out more at shannonethridge.com. And there's a link on there that you can click to schedule a free 15-minute consultation to just discuss your potential participation. Whatever questions or anxieties you have, we can talk that through and figure out, is this the right next step for you? So, Angie, I got to get you to a workshop someday. Just
I know
that 4-day immersion experience together. I think it would be such a full circle moment for us, since we spent so many weekends teaching together when we didn't know what we didn't know. Could you imagine how powerful a dynamic it would be for you and I to teach? I mean, they're not saying that we still don't know some things, but we know a heck of a lot more than we did back then. Let's just say
we do. Yes.
Yeah. So we will have another conversation about messy sex, one more around this topic of personal boundaries, both inside and outside marriages, even inside friendships and work relationships. Healthy boundaries are the key to having a healthy life. So join us again next time. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of Sexual Confidence on Tap with Shannon Ethridge and friends. We love you for listening.
And thanks for tapping on us.